find yourself struggling with academics?
I didn't. I think that coming through high school and playing sports that way, I'd always had a really solid foundation in academics. My parents always stressed academics before everything else. So when I got here, I was able to really focus on school. I think our practice schedule really helped in that we practice first thing in the morning, and we were done with practice by about 8:30. So it gave us the whole day to really focus on the classes that we needed to take, being able to use tutors if we needed to, and having time to study and go to office hours and things like that. So I was able to take full advantage of being a student as well as an athlete. So I never really felt the pressure of academics, and for me, school always came first. So I kind of made that my priority.
Right. Another question is, obviously you found like a good job. Do you think it's like today it's getting harder for student athletes to find jobs?
I think it's getting harder in general for students, regardless of whether they're athletes or not, to find jobs. I think that student athletes actually have a little bit of a leg up on some students when it comes to it. They don't always necessarily have the opportunity to do the internships and the volunteering and things like that, but the skill sets that they do have as an athlete actually are things that employers are looking for. They've got the time management skills down. They've got the organization. They've got working as part of a team. They're able to accept, I don't want to say criticism, but they're able to take constructive criticism and actually use it. Because coaches are always saying, okay, you can fix this or something like that, and you can take it, process it, use it, and then implement it. And I think that's something that actually translates really well into the workforce. And so I think part of what student athletes might struggle with is transitioning those skills that they've got from their team and from their sport and actually applying them to the job and understanding how they transition into the real world. Because you guys are so well equipped, but sometimes it's realizing the skill sets that you actually have that'll end up helping you out later.
So to build off that, do you think like some of the majors aren't setting like students up for success in the real world? Like certain majors that have nothing to do with what they want to do after school, but are just for like academic eligibility for the meantime?
I think that some majors offer more flexibility for students, which I think is actually, it can be good. Students don't always necessarily know what they want to do, and I'm actually a really good example in that my undergraduate degree is in business and communications, and I'm doing academic advising instead. And so what I think having a degree in general is putting students above everybody else. You don't necessarily, with the exception of things like mechanical engineering or biomedical engineering, where having that technical background is really important. I think just having a degree, particularly from a school that's as strong as Syracuse, and having a very strong liberal arts core in any one of the majors, it teaches you to think critically, it teaches you how to analyze, it teaches you how to write well. And so having that degree is a step forward. And having the flexibility in some of the programs lets students explore lots of different things and helps them kind of sometimes learn what they don't want, but sometimes helps them figure out, okay, this is what I do want, but then you've got the degree, you've got a little bit of what you do want, and then you can essentially take that out into the real world, and you have a degree, and if you can spin what your degree was made of, and if you can spin what your talents and skill sets are, you can essentially get into most of the jobs you want, unless there's specific licensing things or technical components that you need to have done. I think that you can take any major and turn it into what you want it to be. So sometimes flexibility and a little bit of that wiggle room is not necessarily a bad thing for students. It gives them that opportunity to kind of explore a lot of different things.
Do you think it's like different for male athletes versus female athletes, like regarding academics?
I think that sometimes there are more professional athletic opportunities for males, and so sometimes that's where some of their focus goes. I think with a lot of the female athletes, there's not as many professional opportunities, so they tend to focus a little bit more on their academics. That's not to say the males don't, but there aren't as many athletic outlets after college for female athletes, and so I think they tend to focus on that extra job or this and that, whereas some of some male athletes in general they're kind of building two tracks. It's a track one and a track 1A. It's, okay, if I want to go professional, here's what I need to do, but even if I have that longest career in the league, I'm done by the time I'm 40, maybe. That's a really long career, and so what do I have after that. So I think they're kind of planning both, but they've got sort of two tracks, whereas I think our female athletes really, they're more one track because there's not as many athletic opportunities professionally. So,
because like I know for me as like a female student athlete, like I'm totally grades first, and then like to see like some of say like the football players in my class who are like my first job option is the NFL, so my grades are totally sidelined. It's kind of like bizarre to me, but then knowing that there's not really a professional opportunity for me versus them, it's like a big difference.
Yep, and I think that's definitely where that difference is there are professional opportunities for them, and there are not as many for females. And again, that's not to say that school is completely back burner for them, but in some cases, they've got to find that balance, and I think it's a little bit easier for female student athletes to find that balance because there's not that professional athletic component afterwards.
Right. We recently had the student athlete career fair. Do you think there could be like more things like that, like to help student athletes get into the workforce?
I definitely do, and I think that's something that our life skills program is actually working on. We've finally been able to get that off the ground, and so we're slowly kind of getting everything out. This is the first year for the career fair, and we learned a lot, and I think that that's something that we plan to continue every year, and every semester we're trying to get more career oriented things. So whether it's mock interviews or resume reviews or different things like that to enable you guys and the student athletes to have those opportunities and to bring employers here and to give you guys the ways to connect, because we know it's hard. Between the season and classes and practice, it's challenging to find those opportunities to be able to take advantage of them, and so whatever we can bring to you, I think makes it a lot better. And so that's definitely something we're working on expanding now that we finally got the first one under our belts, and so we're ready to move forward and continue to add different things for you guys.
Because I think that stuff is like so beneficial. Like the career fair is just like going as like a sophomore. Like I learned a lot for next year, and it's easier to be in like an athlete market versus going with all the other regular students to the career fair.
Yep, and I think as an athlete, when the career fair is focused on the attendees being student athletes, I think the employers also know sort of what they're getting as well. They know the skill sets that are coming out of the students that they'll be speaking with. So I think it's definitely a great opportunity.
So overall, you think like life after college athletics is practical for the student athlete? Like there's doors open.
There's lots of doors open, and it's a matter of taking advantage of what's in front of you. As I mentioned before, a degree is the first step. Regardless of what it's in, it's that first step. And I think that you guys have such an amazing skill set as student athletes. Again, the teamwork with the organization, the time management, the being able to accept criticism and move from it, that it kind of gives you a little bit of a leg up. Now I think that you have to be willing to take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you, because we can host things like career fairs or resume reviews or mock interviews, but if students aren't taking advantage of it, then it's only going to be as good as what you put into it. Just like everything, you wouldn't go to practice, kind of go half effort on this and partial effort on this, and then expect to win the national championship. So career fair and careers and things like that are very similar in that you're going to get out what you put in. So if you're contacting employers, if you're sending out your resumes, if you're going to career fairs, if you're attending mock interviews and kind of preparing yourself, then you're going to be in such a great spot when you get out of college to work on that career field and work on getting into the real world. That it really is what you put into it, you're going to get out of it. And so if you're not going to put any effort into trying to find a job, then being an athlete's not going to be the one thing that propels you into a position. But if you're actively pursuing different things, that student athlete trait is just going to be one more thing that kind of pushes you off yourself.
Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
So I'm here today with Rachel Burkhart, student athlete at Syracuse University for the softball team, and we are discussing the idea of life after college athletics. Do you think it will be harder for you to find a job after college because of being an athlete?
Actually, I think it would be a lot easier because of an athlete, because as an athlete you learn a lot how to work with people, a lot of skills that are really beneficial for the workforce. And I don't know, I feel like everyone would rather have an athlete rather than someone who's not an athlete, because you learn a lot more and you get a lot more experience from working with others.
Do you think that because on your resume it just says, I know for myself, I don't have anything on my resume besides the fact that I'm a student athlete because of how many hours I've devoted to playing softball, like preparing for softball. So do you think that's going to like affect you down the line when you don't have actual work experience, just athletic experience?
No, because I feel like because you have to devote so much time to being an athlete, you have to have really good time management skills, you have to be able to work well with others, you have to know what you're doing, but balance school and going to a top university like Syracuse. I feel like it's so beneficial because you're saying I can do two things at once, so I'm good for you. Like, I can show you what I'm worth.
Right. Do you know what career field you'd be looking into? Would you go into like coaching, or you want like a job?
I want a job. I want to be working in business because I do want to own my own business one day, or to work with people across the country and to have that experience, you know. So I think being a student athlete would really help prepare for that. So.
Do you think in some circumstances, well, first of all, what's your major?
I am going to major in CRS and minor in business.
Okay. So do you think those majors will prepare you well for a future job?
Oh, yeah. I mean, communication is such an important part of any job. You have to be able to know who you're communicating with and how to communicate on so many levels. And business is obviously, there's what I want to do with my life is directly related to business. Since I need to communicate for my business because I want to own my own company, I think that's really important. So they both kind of just go together.
Right. Just now, do you think with some other student athletes, an issue could possibly be that they're taking certain majors to pass or fail? I mean not to fail, but definitely to pass. Do you think that's like an issue somewhere down the line where, say, a student's majoring in child and family studies, like, could they really find a career after that?
I mean, it can be difficult at some points, but I think as a student athlete, you meet a lot of younger kids who look up to you and you want to talk to them and you kind of understand that feeling because you have been a kid and you kind of relate to them some more. So I feel like with that kind of study, it still helps you in some way because you still have a feeling of what that's like and it kind of helps you remember being a kid if you're trying to work with kids. So there's that. I mean, in some cases, it's a little more complicated because you can't work directly with that all the time. But
do you think this applies more to the male athletes than the female athletes?
That's a tough question. I mean, being a feminist, which I really am, I always want to say no to that question, but I feel like in a lot of cases, it does lean toward men a lot of times.
Right, like, maybe like some of the stuff that just happened at the basketball team, like academic integrity, like, they're taking some of these majors just to pass and get through school, like, they're not even worried about an after school process because they think they're going to the NBA, the NFL. But for people like us, it's like...
Yeah, softball is not basketball. It's not football. It's not you get paid millions to go play afterwards. I mean, it's literally for us, you can go play professionally, but you don't get paid that much. So for us, it's you're doing this to get through school, but you better be ready for the real world also. And they're never considering that. So it's like, okay, well, you think you have it easy. I have it 10 times harder.
Right, because there is
nothing for us.
Professional for us.
Yeah.
So, do you think sometimes, like, girls lose sight of that, though? They think about playing overseas if they want to, and, like, it's just, like, hard.
Yeah, I think some girls think that, because they play softball, you know, oh, I'll get the chance to go do this and travel because of softball, and it's like, that's still really rare. Like, going to the NBA is rare, but that for us, being able to do that is once in a million. It's never going to happen because it's so hard, and it's so hard to pay for it. And it's like, we don't have the opportunity to do that.
And you have to be, like, the top player, the top this, and to play overseas is not really realistic. And then it's also, like, the question of whether or not, like, we're prepared well enough as student athletes to go into the real world. Like, do you think, like, everything that's provided to you at, like, Stevenson and, like, through the coaches, like, do you think it's, like, all, like, profitable, like, for you?
I mean, I feel like it is. There's certain situations where obviously it can improve, which is in cases for everything. But I think that even for female athletes, it doesn't matter. It still takes kind of a process to get to the job you want to. You have to work for it, and it takes a while to get there.
Right.
Like, 3 years minimum is usually to get to the job that you specifically want. So I think there's certain areas where our education can improve for us because it is difficult, but I think we get an okay amount for what we do.
Right. Do you think, like, on the road, especially now, we're on the road for 10 days,
yeah.
a week, a little over a week. Like, do you think it would be better if, like, the coaches sat down and actually did, like, study tables and, like, enforce this idea of education over athletics?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that tutors should definitely be coming with people over the trip, like even getting paid, volunteered, but somebody needs to be with us to help us because over the trips, the traveling is really difficult.
Right.
I mean, you can come back and you can email them, but it's not the same. It's like you need someone sitting there helping you, showing you something that you don't understand. And just the fact that it isn't makes it more difficult, and that's probably why education isn't being enforced as much as it should be.
Right. So, have you looked into any of, like, the career services things or, like, I know it's probably too early for you, but, like, internships, like,
Yeah.
do you think there's a lot, like, accessible to you as a student athlete?
As a student athlete and where I live, yes, but I don't think that's the case for everybody.
Can you talk a little bit more about where you live?
I live in California, Orange County, big area, super popular, and athletes are all the rage. Like,
Right.
You play a sport, you're like, oh yeah, you know, that's so common. Like, oh, do you go to college for it? I'm like, yeah. So if I say that, then they're literally like, she works hard. Like, she got there. Like, she's the next step. Like, she works here. I know she's good. I don't have to worry about her. So I'm just like, okay, that's a benefit for me because I live in California.
Right.
But if I were to live somewhere else, they're like, okay, you're a student athlete.
Right.
But because of where I live, I'm like, hey, I'm a student athlete. I need a job. I want to make sure I'm doing this for school. They're like, you got it.
Like, do you think in some scenarios you're going to have to sell yourself a little bit more?
Yeah, and I
Because
think
sometimes
that's
people think athletes have the easy way out. Like,
Yeah.
again, the whole thing that just happened with the basketball team, like,
definitely
academic integrity. So maybe, like, people perceive you as, like, not being up to academic standards or, like, work level academically because of the idea that athletes are dumb
Yeah,
and get
yeah.
good grades.
And I think that's just all in the way of how I present myself too. And I need to know that going to my company and even that with my background, that there's never just going to be one person that feels the same, but I still need to go up there with that presence of mind and how I go. And that's kind of where softball ties into it. You know, playing the game, you have to have the same presence, be consistent. And I think that works with the workforce when you're trying to impress somebody. You need to have the same approach as always when you go and meet somebody.
So, after college, do you think, like, you're prepared for, like, success, like, in the workforce? Like, and do you think athletics is going to tie into that, like, fully?
I think my experience with athletics and what it's taught me is going to help tie into that. And how it's been able to shape who I am today is going to help me with being able to, like, go to Syracuse, and how it's led me to where I am is going to prepare me. So I think I am fully prepared after I finish my education and after I graduate. So I think I'll be okay.
Right. Do you think you have, like, enough time for studying, like, exam stuff, or do you think, like,
Going into when I get to business, I know it's going to be harder because I'm still in CRS and I haven't transferred from my minor yet. But I think once I get the combination of the two, and I'm also thinking about adding another, so minor in 2, major in 1. So I know it's going to be difficult, but I think it'll still be doable. If I have to manage my time a lot better. I have to manage what I'm doing, where I'm going constantly. I can't just say, oh, I'm tired after a practice. So it's difficult. It really is. And I wish there was more time, more benefits, but it's still really doable. Just harder.
okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.